Thank you for watching an unusual video. Unusual for me because I don't talk about guns all the time. I'm not a gun channel. I have too small of an arsenal to be a gun channel. And I'm really close to you. Usually I'm further away from the camera. But I'm thinking about guns because I know somebody who wants to buy his first handgun. And so that's made me think about it a lot. And so I'm going to talk about what the different options are. The person who's thinking about buying his first handgun is thinking about a gun for self-defense and concealed weapon carry, which is another way of saying self-defense away from home. So, because of that, what did I just do? Alrighty. Some guns I do not recommend, like that. Too slow to get a second shot off, it doesn't have a magazine, and it has a lot of it. It's a big gun, so it would be hard to conceal. That's a bolt action handgun. They make them. Nothing immoral about it. It's a good target gun, depending on the size of ammunition it shoots. Hunting gun. Alrighty. Derringer style. Only gives you 2 shots. Not immoral, but if the goal of your gun is for that thing that hopefully doesn't happen when you're attacked, you might need more than 2 shots. If there's more than 2 attackers, if you miss with one of the shots, because shooting under stress is different than shooting under shooting paper with nothing shooting back at you, or shooting at you to start it. This is Heiser Defense. Defense is part of the name, but you only get 1 shot, and then you need to reload. So not what I would recommend for a self-defense gun, although that one is small, so it does meet that criteria. Where is it? There we go. Come on. This one is a single shot break action. Single shot, you only have 1 shot, not an ideal self-defense gun, and it's big. It's too big to easily conceal. Alright. These things are 2 feet long. That's too big to make it easily concealable. It's technically not designed to be held up to your shoulder. It would have a bigger back end of it, a bigger stock if it was. Alright, AR-15 pistols. Not immoral, but if your goal is a gun for concealed carry self-defense, too big. And banned in some states as assault weapons. Which is crazy. It's do we punish people who drive cars through crowds of people by banning cars for the people who don't drive them through the crowds of people? No. Then why do it for the other people? Okay, so that leaves only of the various kinds of guns out there. Okay. Wasn't trying to do that. Semi-automatic handguns and revolvers. Alright. Now, most of the rest of this video is going to be which is better, semi-automatic handgun or revolver. Unfortunately, this is not really an option. Now, that it's debatable whether that's too big for concealed carry. But what's not debatable is it's a semi-automatic gun. And, of course, with a semi-automatic gun, the gun gets ready for the next shot, but you still need to pull the trigger. It would be fully automatic if you don't need to pull the trigger for each shot. The way that happens is the top of the gun, called the slide, slides back and then forward. And when it slides back, it gets rid of the old brass that was holding the bullet that was fired and puts a new loaded ammunition from the magazine into the chamber. The chamber, of course, is the part of the gun that holds the ammunition. Later, when I talk about how what size of gun to get or what size of ammunition it shoots, I will say a gun chambered for, because that means chambered as a verb is describing what size it is, or as a verb of when the people that made the gun made the part of the gun that holds the ammunition. Alright, but this gun is not legal in some states in America. It looks too much like an Uzi, and Uzis are banned in at least one state, and look-alikes. Just the shape of a gun gets it banned in one crazy state that's violating our basic human rights. There we go. And I don't recommend being a test case for unconstitutional laws, but if you're brave enough to do that, God bless you. Alright, now, these are called revolvers because that part there revolves. It turns around. That is the cylinder. It functions as a magazine because it holds the gun, that's the round that's not being shot, and the chamber. And of course, the magazine holding part of the cylinder that's lined up with the barrel is the one that fires the gun, and then it rotates. When it comes to revolvers, there's more than one kind of revolver. This one, I can be certain from the shape of it, is single action. Meaning, you have to reach up and pull the hammer back, or cock the hammer, each time you fire. Whereas sometimes you can know from the shape of the handle which kind of a revolver it is. This one probably is a double action, but if that hammer's exposed, you probably have the option of cocking it as a single action. They make them without the hammer in back. When you see a revolver without the hammer sticking out the back, you know it is double action only. That when you pull the trigger it does two, hence double, two things, cocks and fires. Now, I would definitely not recommend a single action revolver for a self-defense gun. When that was advanced technology in the 1800s, that was a great idea for a self-defense gun. But now, not a great idea for a self-defense gun. I wouldn't recommend the double action only, but I understand some people might like them. The argument for double action only is that if you don't have that hammer sticking out the back there, that you won't snag it on your clothes, on your pocket, or on your jacket when you're trying to get it out to defend yourself. Alright, now, which is better, semi-automatic or revolver? Well, they each have their strengths and weaknesses. If you are needing a very compact gun or wanting a very compact gun, you're going to be able to get more compactness in a semi-automatic gun. Because the magazine and the handle are together. The magazine goes in the handle, and that helps it to be compact. Whereas the handle on the revolver doesn't have the magazine in it. It's just there. And so there's no way to shorten this by mixing those. Okay. Now, there are unconstitutional laws that don't make sense if you really think about it. A politician that makes life hard on law-abiding people is not really trying to stop crime. Or they're really stupid. But if you're intelligent, you're not really trying to stop crime. If you're hassling people who are trying to defend themselves and don't rob, murder, steal, and sell chemicals to people that will kill them, if you're not doing all those things, and you want a gun to defend yourself, it doesn't make sense to make it hard for you to get that gun to defend yourself, because the criminals who ignore laws against murder, robbery, extortion, selling chemicals that will kill people, they're not going to obey the gun laws. If you really want to do something about crime, you make the person committing the crime regret it, or make it harder for them to commit the crime. But you're not making it that much harder for them to commit a crime if their intended victims of their murders and robberies can't shoot back. But anyway, in some states there are laws about banning guns, limiting guns. A revolver, some of those laws limit the magazine capacity of the guns. So how many shots you have before you have to reload. In a state like that, a revolver is better because there's only so much room for them to put new ammunition or new holes in there for ammunition. So a revolver is probably not going to violate those unconstitutional violation of human rights state laws that limit the size of a magazine. The New York SAFE Act is one of the ones that does that. Another ridiculous law is microstamping. There's a proposed law that requires the brass to be microstamped, to actually have an engraving made by the gun when it fires on the brass, so we know who fired what brass that's laying on the ground. But this is unconstitutional for one reason: it's unrealistic. That would be ridiculously expensive to make something that complicated if it could be made. And that would, making guns unavailable to the poor has been tried in the past to prevent recently freed slaves from owning guns. Some of the earliest gun bans in America were bans on less expensive guns, and the goal of those bans was to keep newly freed slaves and the generation that was alive of their descendants from having guns to defend themselves. And that all right. and modern bans on inexpensive guns are equally as immoral. Just because I am not a successful YouTuber with billions of dollars or millions of dollars, or a successful athlete that get paid hundreds of millions of dollars a year, does not mean my life is not important and I don't deserve protection. And if I don't have money, the best protection I might be able to afford is paying myself to be a bodyguard for myself for free. And I might not be able to afford an expensive gun, but I still have that basic human right to defend myself. But the microstamping law also is a bad law, because it would be easy for people to frame somebody else, confuse the police, by picking up spent brass at a shooting range and throwing it on the ground. But revolvers are an exception to that bad, stupid law. So if you're not volunteering to be the test case, in other words, the person who violates an unconstitutional law, hoping that the courts will declare it unconstitutional, and risking them not declaring it unconstitutional and being locked up and convicted, if you're not going to be that test case, a revolver is a way to avoid those microstamping laws legally. And that is because the revolver hangs onto the ammunition. It stays in those cylinders. When you fire the next round, it's still in the cylinder that's going around. Okay, now, what if you're worried about a weaker family member being able to shoot the gun? You know, people that care about their family, they want them to be able to defend them. Perhaps there's a scenario somebody's worried about where they are at work. The main gun buyer or main gun shooter is at work when there's a break-in at the house, and he wants his wife to be able to defend herself with the gun that he bought, that he stores at the house. And the wife is not as strong as the husband, or children that are mature enough to defend themselves and not play with guns in dangerous ways. You know, a teenager's old enough to know you don't point a loaded gun at somebody who's not a threat. And don't play around with a realistic gun, a real gun, by pointing it at somebody, because what if you're wrong about it not being loaded? A revolver is better in this way, because even if somebody's too weak to pull the trigger, these double action, single action triggers, you have to pull the trigger harder. There's more weight behind it to cock it than to fire it. So if somebody's a little bit weak, they can still reach up with their hand to pull back the hammer to cock it, and that takes less strength to just get your whole palm or hand on something to pull it back than it does to manipulate something and pull something that you have to pinch and pull. And so that's better in that scenario. I've seen a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson chambered semi-automatic gun that a woman who was in her 40s and a 13-year-old boy were not strong enough to pull back. Now, if the gun is already set up, if you put it into a gun safe loaded, then it still could be used by a weaker person in a self-defense scenario. But if something goes wrong and you need to manipulate the gun to get it ready to fire, then you got a problem if you have a semi-automatic handgun that has a slide that is too heavy for somebody else in the family to pull back. Now, I haven't tested out or seen somebody that was not able to handle the .40 caliber Smith & Wesson try a weaker chambered gun. Maybe a lower powered gun than a .40 Smith & Wesson will take less strength to pull back. And one reason for the strength of the spring in a semi-automatic gun is it's got to handle the bullet recoiling. The same pressure from the burning gunpowder that pushes the bullet out is pushing back against the gun. Now, which kind of gun is better for quick reloads? If your only goal is to get a gun you can reload more quickly. Semi-automatic. You push a button, magazine falls down the bottom, and you stick the new magazine in. With the revolver, the most common configuration now, the cylinder swings to the side, and then you have to push a rod that pushes the ammunition out, and then put the new ammunition in. It's going to take longer. Now, some people practice doing it, and you can be very fast if you practice with it. But you're still going to be a little bit faster with a semi-automatic. And they do make speed loaders. A device that holds all the ammunition ready to go. So you put the speed loader in, twist or push the speed loader, and it drops a full cylinder's worth of ammunition into the cylinders. Okay. Now, if you want a gun that's less picky about the ammunition, revolver. And that is because the thing that makes the revolver ready to fire the next shot is what the shooter does. Pulling the trigger on the double action rotates a cylinder, gets it ready to fire the next shot, no matter how, no matter what ammunition it is. Pulling the hammer back to cock it rotates the cylinder, gets it ready for the next shot. There's two reasons that semi-automatic handguns are picky about the ammunition. Well, or that makes it sound like the gun is thinking. It matters what ammunition you put into it. The same size ammunition that fits into the same size chamber can have differences. Differences in how much gunpowder is in there, what kind of gunpowder, how much pressure the powder creates, the size of the bullet, and the shape of the bullet. There are bullets that are completely flat on the top. There are bullets that are rounded. There are bullets that are more pointed or conical. There are bullets that are hollow point. They look like think of a volcano. How it's got that rim around it. There are bullets that are hollow point but then filled with some goop or plastic or rubber to make them work better. So you need the ammunition to push back hard enough against the slide. If it doesn't push back hard enough against the slide, you're going to have to take your hand off of the gun, reach up, and pull the slide back for each shot. In a self-defense scenario, that's time you don't want to spend. The other reason it matters what ammunition you have with a semi-automatic gun is to get ready for the next shot, it needs to get a round in the chamber. And the slide, when it goes forward, it strips off the top ammunition from the magazine and puts it in the chamber. Well, the shape of the ammunition might affect how it interacts with the parts on the inside of the gun, and if they don't interact right, it won't be ready to fire. The ammunition might jam the slide part way shut and not all the way shut and without a round in the chamber, or something like that. Alrighty. If somebody wanted to get a suppressible gun, the person I'm thinking about is not planning on getting a suppressor, but if he were to want one, then semi-automatic is the way to go. Because I've had this one revolver up here for a while. Let's get a different revolver up here. I didn't... Oh, come on. Come on, work properly. I did not touch it. I was sliding. Really? There we go. Alright. I don't think they make any suppressors for revolvers or suppressible revolvers. What would make a gun suppressible is if at the end of the barrel there they put threads, like on screws and bolts and nuts, so you could screw on the suppressor. And the reason they don't make suppressible revolvers is you've got this gap here. There has to be a big enough gap in between the cylinder and the barrel that it can rotate. And that'll be enough of a gap for some sound to get out of that, which completely undoes the suppressing, or it wouldn't work to suppress one because of that. Alright, so there are 3 kinds of ammunition failures. And these ammunition failures are not things you try to have or hope to have, but they're out there. They are extremely rare because the ammunition manufacturers would lose a lot of customers if it was known that, a high percentage of their ammunition had these problems. One problem you can have with ammunition is a dud. It just doesn't fire. Well, with the revolver, because you get it ready for your next shot with your hands already in position, assuming you get a double action revolver. If you're planning on using it single action style, or you buy a single action revolver, you already are mentally prepared and planning on reaching up and pulling back the hammer. And so it's not going to be a big problem if you have a dud, because pull the trigger one more time, it fires. If you want to single action it, treat it like a single action. You were already planning on pulling that hammer after it fired, so you'd be a little quicker reaching up and pulling that hammer than you would be if it was a semi-automatic that you were not planning on doing that to. Okay, now, other ammunition problem is a hang fire. Hang fire, it means the same thing you would mean when you tell somebody, hang on, I'll be there. Hang on, don't leave without me. You're telling them, wait a little bit, I'm almost ready. Well, a hang fire is ammunition that it hangs on. It waits a few seconds. It doesn't fire right away. Now, if you end up with a hang fire, it's better to have a semi-automatic. But they're rare, because people don't want that. Kind of like a car, a brand new car that you don't know if it's going to run is rare, because people don't want that. But if you have a hang fire on a semi-automatic gun, the ammunition is still in the chamber. There we go. If you have a hang fire semi-automatic gun, the ammunition is still in the chamber. If you keep that gun pointed in a safe direction, like downrange, it'll go off in a few seconds. If you get a hang fire with a revolver, and you're in a scenario where you don't want to wait to see if it's a hang fire, like self-defense, or you're at a shooting range and you're getting impatient, and you fire before you pull the trigger to fire the next round, the ammunition that's a hang fire is still going to go off in a few seconds. And when it does, it will shoot out of the cylinder into the side of the gun, probably damaging the gun, potentially damaging the shooter. That probably wouldn't kill the shooter, but you'll have some metal parts in the air flying around near your hands. A squib round. Alrighty. A squib round means the same thing when you're talking about guns as it does the other times I've heard that word used. The only time I can remember hearing squib used was when I was reading a book that I do not recommend you buy, because the author talks about her books, or fictional books about wizards, as if you could learn something from real life about what happens in real life. No. Miss Person, who I'm not going to promote by saying your name, these characters in your books did what they did because you wrote that they did it. You created it. You forced them. You're the dictator of what happens in the books. So-and-so didn't choose to do something. You wrote that so-and-so did something. So I can't learn anything about real life from your books, even if they were fun to read. And a person's gotten rich off their books and now is a rich hypocrite. Owning mansions and not taking in any refugees, while telling her country that all the poor people in her country have to suffer fake UGs in their own neighborhoods. Yeah, fake UGs that won't be affecting her. So, squib, it means underpowered or powerless. In this one fictional book, the people born to wizards, wizard parents who do not have magical powers, are squibs. They're powerless. Well, a squib around is ammunition that gets the bullet out of the brass. It leaves the chamber, but it doesn't have enough power to get all the way out of the gun. Then you have an obstructed barrel. That's a big, dangerous problem. Now, neither kind of gun, revolver or semi-automatic, is better for a squib load. And if you ever think you might have a squib load, the only sane thing to do is stop shooting and disassemble the gun and look down the barrel of the disassembled gun. Or try to poke it out, see if you have a stick you can put in the barrel to poke it out or test it. Alrighty. Last but not least, chambering. What size ammunition would I recommend to somebody buying a gun for self-defense? The bare minimum is .22 long rifle, and that's a minimum, not what I highly recommend. You should never buy something so weak as .22 short if you think it's a self-defense gun. You need it to actually get into the attacker's skin. If somebody could find one, if they can handle the recoil from it, 9mm or 38 special is probably the minimum you should recommend. Although if it's more powerful than a .22 long rifle, .22 long rifle is like the absolute minimum, not the highly recommended minimum, but the minimum. Don't even think about less powerful than that. So, thank you for watching. Feel free to comment in the comments section if you have thoughts about what somebody's first personal self-defense concealed weapon carry handgun should be. Bye-bye.